This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Our guests are John Rizzo, a retired CIA attorney, served as the agency's acting general counsel during most of the Bush administration, author of the new book, Company Man. We're also joined by Scott Horton, human rights attorney, lecturer on human rights at Columbia University. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Juan?
Well, John Rizzo, I wanted to ask you about a policy issue in terms of the growth and expansion of the CIA in recent decades, and especially its relationship to the official American military. You take, for instance, Guantanamo. Guantanamo is a military base, but yet it also became the site of the CIA interrogations of prisoners there in the war against terrorism. And the CIA's possession of its own Air Force, its own ability to attack people around the world with missiles and targeted killings. What do you see as the tension or problems between the established military and its system of accountability to the public versus the CIA as the CIA continues to expand its efforts around the world?
Yes, Juan. Well, that's a fascinating question. I'll try to be concise, but before I start, I should just briefly clarify, the CIA interrogation program did not take place at Guantanamo. It took place at, again, another new word in the post-9/11 lexicon, the black sites overseas. So there were no CIA interrogations done at Guantanamo. That was strictly a military and DOD operation. But to get to your larger question, yes, there has been, and I certainly, 9/11, as it did a lot of things, accelerated this new phenomenon of increased CIA involvement in paramilitary activities, creation of, as you indicated, Air Force, that would seem to parallel the normal existing traditional roles and duties of the U.S. military. And personally, I did get increasingly concerned about this overlap between the CIA's traditional historic functions and getting into, to my mind, was activities that could be more effectively carried out by the Pentagon, which, after all, is a much bigger organization with much more money at its disposal. So I think it's a trend that bears watching.
Scott Horton?
Well, I think at the end, when we review all these issues surrounding the CIA, this is the big question we come back to at the end, which is the CIA's mission really true to the original vision of the National Security Act? And I think it's changed, because that original vision was it was going to be an intelligence gathering and analysis organ that was going to be largely divorced from operations, may have a little bit of authority on rare occasions to engage in covert operations, but I think the idea was it would be quite rare. Largely operations would be controlled by the military. And I think what we see today is we see an entity that has paramilitary units, has its own Air Force, has been waging a 7, 8, 9-year drone war in Pakistan with hundreds of strikes, more than 300 by now. That just seems almost impossible to reconcile with his original vision. And the question, I think you come back to a question that Harry Truman asked in the end of 1963, after the failed Bay of Pigs incident after President Kennedy's assassination. He said he was really very worried about what had happened to the CIA. It had become so heavily engaged in operations that its intelligence gathering and analysis function was failing. And of course, today we see a Russian invasion in Crimea, and only days before that, we see CIA analysts on the Hill saying that there's no realistic risk of such a thing happening. We see a failure to foresee the Arab Spring. So this sort of analytical function is falling down. There's a direct connection, I think, between those failures and the heavy emphasis on operations.
John Rizzo, you were the CIA's chief legal officer for 7 years. In 2011, you were quoted by Newsweek in an article titled "Inside the Killing Machine." You were quoted describing drone killings as, quote, murder, and you described the target list as, quote, basically a hit list. Would you stand by those characterizations now?
Well, Amy, that interview was to be honest about, was a mistake on my part. I thought I was off the record. The reporter thought we were on the record. So I said things in that interview that I never wanted or intended to be published. But you know, the drone program is what it is. It's a program to target and kill terrorists, and you know, it is directed and authorized by the President of the United States. I think I should not have used the term murder, but it is definitely a killing program, and it is a killing machine.
And the list that the president has, that he takes responsibility, a hit list?
Well, I mean, again, it was a euphemism. Again, probably an unpolitic choice of words, but it is, you know, when you get right down to it, it is a list of people who are targeted for lethal action. So.
And we do know from all the information out, thousands of innocent people have been killed. I mean, you look at the NYU Stanford report, living under drones, and other information that's come out. I wanted to ask about this issue of prosecution. Scott Horton, who should be held accountable?
Well, in the end of the day, of course, John in his book talks about the prosecution or the investigations that were undertaken both under President Bush and under President Obama that led to no action and no prosecution. And those investigations started from the bottom. They started with the allegations. They started actually with the CIA Inspector General's report and then focused on individual CIA officers. I think there's a fundamental problem with the U.S. Department of Justice dealing with these things, and that is that it's almost impossible to deal with them divorced from the policy choices that was made. Under the doctrine of command responsibility, it's those who set the policies who bear ultimate responsibility if criminal violations are deterred. And here we have the Department of Justice involved in this process of fixing the policy, so it really couldn't investigate it itself. So I think that's the dilemma of examination and prosecution. And I think we see even now with the Senate Select Committee's report that there's no discussion really of accountability. Philip Giraldi and the piece he did in the American Conservative, in fact, flags that point, and that's right. You know, we have a clear problem there. And
should Bush be prosecuted? Should Rumsfeld? Should Cheney?
There should be.
Should President Obama? There
should be a really independent investigation, which still hasn't occurred, as far as I'm concerned. And the basis for it has got to be disclosure of much more factual detail that's still not there. I want to add one other thing, and that is, John said, you know, no CIA operations at Guantanamo. That's still a huge question. I've seen a lot of evidence suggesting the contrary. Certainly, we had the Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane operations that were going on out there, which were operations geared towards perhaps turning prisoners who are about to be released, turning them into assets. Of course, we have programs like that going on in every single war. You'd be guilty of some failure not to. We've got a lot of evidence linking the CIA to those programs.
John Rizzo, even if you thought you were off the record, you do stand by what you said. You're talking murder, hit lists. Do you think that administration officials should be prosecuted? Well,
Amy, I mean, I can't be obviously. I'm somewhat biased in this, since I was one of the senior officials involved that took part in the implementation and conception of the program. No, I don't. Look, this is why I support the Senate report coming out. All of the facts should come out. The American people deserve to know what was done in their name and make their own judgments. But at this point, going back now and going back against the individuals, whether they be senior or further on down the chain. I mean, this interrogation.
We'll have to leave it there, but I want to thank you both for being with us. John Rizzo's book is called